Welcome to Small Biz Life, episode 148, Learning to Sell Like a Mother with Renee Hribar.
Woohoo!
Good morning, Renee. We're so happy to have you with us today.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited I know both of you. I love that. I love our community.
No, it's super exciting because a lot of our paid members in our HQ group, this is like one of the big things that they ask about all the time, sales.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are super excited to bring you on the podcast to talk about selling, because we just finished up like a 30-day challenge in our Facebook group, and everybody was like, I know I need to sell more, and I hate it. I hate sales. And I know that's one thing like you are just like super passionate about.
Yes.
Yeah, it's because it's never just one thing. There's the sale happens throughout our connecting with people from the moment to beyond. You know, before we work with them, while we're working with them, and then after.
Yeah, that's great. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started, and why you love this so much when most people think it's a 4-letter word?
Yeah. So rewind the tape, I guess, in 1994. I'll be quick about this. I graduated from college. 5 days after, I got a summer job. And I was like, if this is sales, I'm not doing it. My parents are both in business owners. I come from a long line of entrepreneurs, and they know that sales is a part of business, but it's not the only thing in business. I've always loved to talk to people. I took the job. It was selling house to house, buy one, get one free greens fee coupons in New York. And I actually loved it. Oh, sorry. Okay. So I'm taking my necklace off. And what I loved about it was that people, they're so raw, right? Like especially, maybe it was just upstate New York, but like people are seriously raw. So it allowed me to really connect with who they are right away. And I was pursuing law school. So that was my original plan. I'm like, I'll just use this sales experience as a way to, prepare for the courtroom or litigation or whatever the case. So honestly, though, I loved it so much. I got promoted to the New York office, Manhattan, and we were getting into the telecom world, and I rode that wave, and I never looked back.
Wow.
So that's the story behind where I am today. The history is, I started my first company. I had made my first million before I was 25. And I bought my mom a house. I bought my mom a car. I moved her across country. Traveled constantly, loved what I did, was, at all the events, getting the equivalent of like the 2 Comma Club award, 20 years ago. And I loved it. And so I became passionate ultimately about this space when I became a mom. And I didn't want to be traveling all the time. I didn't want to have to leave my little world of my family to be able to impact people in a positive way. And so what I found mostly in the online space is people that were entrepreneurs, again, can relate, long line, but that felt that sales was a 4-letter word. And so the way I look at it, to answer that question quickly, is it's just having a conversation with people. Why do you love your business? And what you love about it is probably what makes it different. It's your passion will be part of that differentiator. And that is what you talk to people about. Instead of like the thing or how many modules, or instead of like the widgets and the facts of it, it's the passion behind it, the why, your story, and then the results that you expect people to get with that thing that you created, not how many megabytes or how many modules or how many minutes.
Yeah. Now, I have to interject here. I met Renee in person at a Digital Insider event in New Haven earlier this year, where she was speaking to a small group of entrepreneurs. It wasn't a selling exercise. It was just her talking about her business. And the love she has for this topic just knocked my socks off. And, I really have to say, I learned a lot just from listening to her talk about her business, and then a few things I've seen of her since then. So really just an incredible passion for what she does, which is so, like I said, it's really good because, I think all entrepreneurs should love sales. And I don't. And I struggled really bad when I started my first business years ago. Just because I hated getting out there in front of people and feeling like I have to do a dog and pony show for them when I know what I'm doing. They should just buy my stuff. And strange how that doesn't really work out for me.
Right. Well, I think you bring up a good point. Thank you, first of all, for that compliment. I don't think that way about myself. I just, I drink my coffee, I get up in the morning and I start talking. So, but I thank you for that. I don't think any of us see our expertise. And I want to say the same thing. When I met Kristin and you in New Haven, I was like, whoa, they're so amazing and smart and so cool. And so I felt that way about you guys. So just so you know, we can never see our own. We're like, that's no way. I'm not like that. That's crazy. But to say about the whole I hated sales or people should just buy my thing, I think that what happens is we get caught up in that dog and pony show. We feel like that's what sales is. It's not. The buyer doesn't even care. I mean, if you think about all the things that you purchased. So if we think about sales for a second and being the seller, first I want you to go into the buyer mode. When you buy something, what makes you buy it? Are you comparing widgets to widgets? I mean, most of the time, no. Most of the time, sometimes it comes down to that. Most of the time, no. You won't even listen to somebody talk about their widget if you don't even like them. Right? So it's not like you have to try to be likable. Just be you. Repel the people. This way it makes it easy to be you all the time. It makes it easy to sell all the time. So instead of trying to be likable, just be who you are. You will repel most people, thank God. And then you will attract the right ones.
Yes.
Because trying to be somebody else is exhausting. Thus the dog and pony show. So when we walk into a sales experience, it is easy for this as the seller to feel like I have to put on this dog and pony show. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. I have to prove myself. I have to show my product. I have to show why it's so good. Instead, I encourage you to ask questions if you haven't already. And so once you ask the right questions, you will hear from the potential buyer, the person, because again, even if you're selling, and a lot of my clients that I work one-on-one with, they are selling to big companies. But I'll tell you, and like I've told everybody else, you don't sell to IBM. You sell to Bob. Bob is the buyer. Bob happens to be a bigwig at IBM, but it's Bob that's buying you. So ask Bob some questions. Discover what Bob is concerned about, what he needs, what he feels, is the problem and where the issues are. And see if you, as a seller, have the solution. And then talk about that solution in a way that Bob talks about it, not in a way that you talk about it. And this is where the expertise starts to flip us around. And the whole idea of I have to prove myself. So here's an example. I talk to Bob. I ask him his questions. I hear how he explains things. I know Bob's explaining it wrong. As a seller, as an expert, I might feel like to prove to Bob that I know my stuff, that he should hear from me the big words and the real way to explain things. All that does to me and Bob is alienate us. Bob now feels like I'm condescending and I'm a know-it-all and I'm going to be hard to work with. Right? Whereas if I just explain things the way Bob explained them, I know how they really work. And as the expert, I know it's all going to work out fine because I'm going to be driving the wheel, right? I'm going to be the one in charge if we end up working together. Bob isn't. Bob just has a problem and I'm the solution. So I'm going to explain it back to Bob in exactly the way Bob explains it so that Bob goes, yeah, that's what I was talking about. And I'm like, I know. Isn't that awesome? And that little piece right there in the sales conversation is where I see so many people mess it up because they're going into it like, oh, it's a sales conversation. I have to prove myself. I have to make him show him in dog and pony show, and they get really freaked out. So does that help? But just by hearing that, how do you think that would help your audience feel if they were to be able to release that kind of pressure?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I think the thing that people struggle with, like you said, is that they're so busy trying to list out the benefits and show how smart they are rather than building relationships and using, it's funny, we've done episodes on this before, use the terminology your customers use. So important. So I want to ask you, you focus on helping women in sales, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
What are some differences in selling for women compared to men?
Yeah. Well, I'll make a little analogy. It's going to go back. We're going to reel the timeline back to when we were dating, before we met our spouses that we love so much and have been married to for 20 years, at least for me. So when we think about the dating world, think about how men are built and wired. It doesn't make women and men. I don't think about, superior or inferior. I just think it's different. I mean, look at us. We're different. for God's sakes, right? I mean, look at us. Of course we're different. So when
and it's important to acknowledge that. Like, I think it's really important, you know, when you're working with people and they're like, I want to sell to everybody. And I'm like, I totally get that. But you need to design your ideal character and sell to them.
Right. So I'm going to use an analogy with dating because we talked about guys. And so like, I know lots of men. I have 3 brothers specifically and a father and a husband. I have a son. I have lots of men in my life that I absolutely love and respect and see every day our differences. But that doesn't mean we're not compatible. But when I pitch something to them, I'm still going to ask questions, but they're going to need initially less details. Women, we want to talk it out and we want to talk it out and then we want to talk it out again. So for men, it's like the facts, ma'am, just the facts. I still have to speak in his language, but he just wants the facts and he wants it quick. And he doesn't really need eye contact. Women, we want eye contact. We want time. We do. I do.
And maybe a glass of wine.
You know, it doesn't hurt.
Well, that's definitely true with me. I kind of look at specs and I go off of that.
Right.
If you have the specs, you have what I want, I'm going to buy from you. I'm not going to go anywhere else. I'm not going to look around. Yeah. Well,
that's the other thing too, is loyalty, right? So men, I also find, are very loyal. And like what they, you know, and I think this is a human thing, but like women like to talk things out and discuss all the options, right? And as men, I feel like when I sell to a man, I need to connect correctly, initially, and quickly, and get to the sale a lot quicker. Whereas women, I'll have a longer pre-framing time if you're going to speak about sales cycles. So there's one difference among many. But if you put us in an MRI, like our brains, women, we light up when we think about community and nurturing and different analogies. Like I'll use cooking analogies, not because every woman cooks, because I know I don't, but I understand it. And I'll use maybe automotive analogies when I talk to men. You know what? It is what it is. It's societal. It's genetics. Our brains don't light up when we see fight combat sequences, whereas men's do. It's genetic. Like it's not all societal or all genetic. What do they say? Like, is it nurture or nature? I mean, it's both strongly. So I think it's okay to identify that there's differences and be okay with those differences, and you know, speak to your customer as an individual is really the key there. But I chose women, like Kristin said, because I am a woman, and I felt that they were when you look around at the audiences, I felt like they were a very underserved audience. And as a woman who had grown up in a sales world, I knew right away that I was one in a few. I was like, oh, you're the girl. Like, oh yeah, I'm the girl. The girl. Out of like 1,000 people.
Yeah, I'm the only one. Right. Exactly. What do you think is the biggest mistake that people make when they're trying to sell in their small business?
Yeah, they come at it with my product. They come into pitch. It's a great question. They come into pitch like, hey, how you doing? Like as soon as they get that, they meet somebody at a networking event, or they get that lead coming in on their funnel, or however they connect with someone initially, they're like, I can't wait to tell them about my thing. Whereas the first thing you should do, and I say this, Kristin has heard me say this more than once, good salespeople have good pitches. So there's nothing wrong with a good pitch. It's going to get you some things, but great salespeople ask great questions. Let me give you a very specific example. I have one client who meets most of her clients in networking events, personal network. She works with big companies, does their marketing, right? So she meets one-on-one with somebody. What she used to do was she would hear some things that she knew she could solve, and she'd be like, hey, you know what? I can totally help you with that. Right? And guess how many customers she got? Very few. She had a real good pitch. But what we first worked on was she would identify what she heard. She could help them. But instead of saying, hey, you know what I can do for you? Instead, she switched it to, hey, I have a question. And she would start with a few questions. Tell me more about such and such. Tell me more about that. How are you working on that? What have you tried so far? Are you looking to do X, Y, and Z? Or tell me what you're looking to do with that. So as opposed to, hey, this is what I can do for you, switch it to, hey, I have a couple questions. Do you have time for a couple questions? And that may lead to a phone call that's a couple questions and not necessarily at the networking event. That meant she was automatically and initially able to set up a future appointment right there and then because she had a few questions versus, hey, I want to pitch you. So people's barriers go down. People like talking about themselves.
Right.
Tell
And
me
it's,
about the baby.
well, and it's interesting because if you think about like the general, like what they teach you about doing like discovery calls, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's 3 questions,
Mm-hmm.
right? To get more information. And so I think that because I built my accounting firm off of live networking, right? I did lots of chambers and that's how I built until the referral network built up and I didn't have to do that anymore.
Right.
And that was the thing. It was like, so tell me about your business and what do you do? And, what are the things that, what systems are you using? And that like in a 5-minute discussion, I could build enough rapport with somebody that they were calling me the next day.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing.
Amazing. When you just take those same 5 minutes and instead of trying to tell them what you do in such a way that makes you sound so great they have to call you, which they're not even listening anyway, instead take those same 5 minutes, like what Kristin said, and ask questions instead. Get you so much further.
One of the first things that I learned about networking was that you spend more time listening than you do talking. And it's the same premise.
Right. So whether it's digital marketing where they come down a funnel, it's all about asking questions and having them continue on because they feel heard. So if you, again, putting on that, before I become a seller, I have to become a buyer and think and empathize from that buyer's perspective. Why would I buy from someone over here versus over here? I want to buy from someone, and especially this is with women, I want to be heard. I want you to listen because I am a unique flower. This is what we all think, right? Even though as the seller, everybody kind of falls into some similar categories. I mean, pretty much. There are exceptions, but as a buyer, we want custom. We want you to hear our every need, repeat it back, consider it, and then reflect. We want to feel seen and heard, and that alone will endear someone to you.
Well, and it's interesting because one of the things that Jeff does with his email list, when people join the list, the first email goes out and says, "Hi, I'm Jeff and I build fantasy worlds and tell me about your world." Hit reply to this email, and he's gotten like 6-page emails back from people.
Yeah.
Who are like, "This is my world and this is what it is," because people just want to be heard, right? And it's the same thing. And if your opening email, if everything's automated, make your opening email a question.
Yep.
And people will actually respond.
Yeah.
It can just be as simple as that.
It can just be as simple as that. Exactly.
Okay, so I want to. I'm like really enjoying this conversation. It's awesome. Yeah. So one of the questions that our audience had is it possible to make sales less scary and maybe even fun?
Yes. Well, I mean, again, back to the dating analogy, like it can be nerve-wracking if you go into the pub at 21 and you're like, "Oh, I wonder if I'm going to meet my future, mate for life or something." You can feel that pressure on yourself, or you can just go in and try to talk to one person at a time. I think this is where digital marketing especially it messes with your mind. At least it messed with mine when I first came in. I was always used to having, talking to one person at a time. Like I would have a conversation. And if I had to do a presentation in front of a board or in a boardroom, I would still always focus on one person. And then I would pull them aside after and make the next appointment with them, right? With a decision maker. And because it's always easier if you just focus on one person at a time. In the digital marketing world, it's easy to say, well, there's 8 billion people on this planet. You can sell to all of them. But what I'm going to encourage you to say is, you can have them in your mind. Of course, it's possible, but unlikely. So just speak to one person at a time. And having that, in the digital world, we talk about, ideal client avatar and all those things, but just speak to Sue. If you're speaking to Sue, think about Sue, look at who Sue is and talk to Sue. If you're talking to Bob, then look at who Bob is, know him and speak to him. And so even if you are writing a broadcast email, imagine that one person that you're talking to. And then guess what? You will speak to that person. They're going to come toward you. They're going to hear they're going to hear themselves.
Yeah, no, and that's what we've done an episode on that too before so one of our HQ members, Aurora Gregory, she said that Procter & Gamble actually has like every single product for P&G has like a person and everybody that's on the marketing team for Tide or for, Dawn has a picture of that person in their office with their name. And every time you are coming up with a commercial or a pitch or whatever it is, you are keeping that person in mind.
Smart.
And it's one of those things that struggle so much, like when I'm working with small business owners, to be like, okay, who is your person? Oh, I don't have a person. I don't need a person. I've got everybody. And you're like, no.
Yeah. I just heard when you said all those big names, I just heard a recent commercial. I don't watch TV that much, but I was watching some kind of thing about those kids in Thailand. I was like, sucked in, because it's a good story. Anyway, there was a commercial on, a Firestone commercial, and the guy was like changing the tire and checking the brakes, and it was like he was in the garage, and he had his Firestone, clean uniform on, and he's like, it's not just about tires and brakes. It's about Mary, a single mom of 3. And he tells this story. I was like, that's so good. If you ever see really good ads in marketing, you're like, that's so good. Do that. Do more of that. But I'd never heard that from Firestone before. They were always like quality and 27-point checklists, but they weren't talking to me. They might have been talking to somebody else. But I felt like, I'm not a single mom. I still felt like, I feel like they're speaking my language a little bit more.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What is the most important thing people need to start selling more? And I think you've kind of talked about this a little bit already, but.
Yeah, well, traditionally, the way to sell more is to either sell to more people or sell more of something to the same person, right? So either have more traffic or more upsells, right? So it's either this way or this way. But in terms of the individual business owner, how can I sell more? What I find often is they're not inviting people to what's next. They're simply just not. They're like, well, they know where I am. They've seen my website. They're gonna, they're on my email list. They follow my page. They'll see it. Instead, one of the fastest ways that I can suggest today, right now, whatever you're listening to this, stop and think about the last 10 people that walked into your business or that came to your page or that liked your page or that somehow connected with your business in any way, shape, or form, whether brick and mortar or digital. And I want you to look them up somewhere, wherever they are. Look them up. Think about who they are. And I want you to send them a personal message, like an actual note. Heck, go as far as paper and pen and stamp it and simply just invite them to something. Hey, even if you have to create that thing. Like for me, if you're in my Facebook world, my Facebook community, I do all kinds of free stuff. Like, hey, a free live virtual coffee chat, 30 minutes. We sit around, we drink coffee and we chat. Why? Because women are my audience. I know that if we're talking, they're more likely to understand me and then be willing to let their guard down and actually get to the root of the matter, which I can help them solve. But it's not threatening. It's totally relaxed. So I'm going to create something to invite them to so that we can connect again. So I can stay top of mind and stay that trusted advisor in that space. So if I'm fixing tires for a living, then I want to be the trusted advisor in the fixing tire space. If I'm selling ice cream, I want to be the trusted advisor. Hey, I'm going to get the best ice cream with the best cones, the best service. I want to be the trusted advisor in that space. So whatever it is, I want to find the last 10 people and send them a personal message today. I guarantee you get more sales out of that. You'll get sales right there today.
That's awesome. That is great. And it's funny because we had some of your HQ group that's one thing that she did. She sent out a couple personal notes and she's like, and they actually signed up for my list and they're like, yes, it's funny. It's like, that's why, one of my earliest memories from retail, when I was in high school is they're like, always ask if they want socks with that. I worked in clothing.
Yeah.
And say,
oh yes.
Do you need socks today? And and it was funny because maybe 20% would go, oh yeah, I'll take a pair of socks.
Amazing.
And it's like, well, do you want fries with that? You go to McDonald's and they say, would you like an apple pie? Yeah. It's the next thing. You're inviting them to the next piece.
Right. Just invite. It's a natural invitation to something, even if it's not an actual product. It's just an invitation to something. Hey, I'm doing something. It could be, hey, I'm doing a live stream next week. I would love to have you, come join me. Do you want the link to check it out? So this is what I do in Facebook Messenger. I've got a group of couple hundred people, and I just did a post this past weekend, totally impromptu. Hey, you know what? It's a holiday weekend. Let's just do some live streaming. And I know a lot of people don't do it, are afraid to do it. And I know it's part of my program that I teach, and my sales program is, live stream video converts really big. So if you want to reach more people fast, I'm telling you, videos, everybody has a production studio in their pocket, use it. And so that was part of it from a strategic standpoint, but from a casual standpoint, I just know I want people to get involved. So people that I had my eye on that I thought are either in my world or I think should be in my world, I personally messaged them. I'm the admin. They're in my group. They're a member. It's not totally weird. I was like, hey, there's this post that's going on. Do you want the link to check it out in the group? I got so much engagement from that.
That's awesome.
Personal, it's easy.
It's little things, right. And I think in the digital space, we get too caught up in how do we automate? Is it, autoresponders and bots and what can you automate? And sometimes it's going back and the personal touch is incredibly important.
Absolutely. Automation can only be done for something that you've done over and over and over and over and over again, so that you know that if it's automated, it will still produce the same results. So it's good for traffic and for volume, but if you're not somebody who needs volume or you're not ready for volume, then hold off on some of that automation is my recommendation.
Well, and sometimes too, going through and refining your message by having the conversations. Right. So even if you're working with Julie Stoyan or you follow Russell Brunson, they're going to say, do it live, do it live, do it live, do it live until like it's, as close to perfect as it's going to get. And then you automate.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It's easy to get caught up in behind the screens, especially if we're working in our pajama pants and always behind the screen, but reach out. So there is definitely benefit to automation as you scale, but as you're building that foundation game, those first 10, 15 customers this month, then you can automate some of those things. But then even with automation, like I have great automated email sequences, but I do things that most people don't do. You probably do them as well. I see who's opening them, and then I actually reach out to them beyond the email sequence. I'm like, oh, Joanne has been opening like every single one of my emails for the past, month. I better reach out to her. She needs a phone call.
Right.
Even if it's just a phone call and it doesn't end up, me being, selling to her. She is my person. So I need to know her language. So because there's more Joannes out there and I'm speaking to them.
No, and I think like that is like the best tip of the episode. Go into your email list and see who is opening your emails and go reach out to them.
Yeah.
Because that is someone who likes you and loves you and is eating up your message. Invite them to the next thing.
Exactly. Worst case scenario, you get some really good pieces of like words. You get really good words for your next sales copy.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario.
Absolutely. No, that's beautiful. All right. So Renee, how do people find you? If they want to connect with you, get that special email and start a conversation, how do they do that?
Yeah, the best way is my website, reneehribar.com. And I have a freebie that's right on the front cover page. It's a free sales training /0 to sales.
Awesome. Very good. It was so great to have you on the show. We are going to have all of your links in the show notes, which go live on Monday. You can go to smallbiz.life.com and get all of that. We'll also put a link to your website in the Facebook Live. It'll be in the YouTube or notes. It'll be all over the place, but you really need to connect with Renee. If this is something that you're having trouble with, I have learned so much from her, in the short time that we have connected. Her group is awesome. The thing that I really love about you is you bring energy to everything that you do, including welcoming new people to your group.
Yes, I love doing that. That comes from like my old sales office days. Like I had sales offices. You bring in someone new, you make a big deal. Like, like cheers, Norm. We also used to have free beer and pizza night. You can't do that online as much.
Yeah.
But if you live near me in Detroit, come on over. We'll have free pizza and beer on Friday night.
There you go. So thank you so much for being on the show. It was awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Go connect with Renee, reneehribar.com. Thanks, guys. We will see you next time.